Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 19th, 2013. I'm James Spencer.
I'm Steve Wilkes.
Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Homebrew Disasters and a visit to my cellar homebrew archive.
Oh my, don't be afraid.
If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. And you're what? Basic Brewing underscore ST?
ST. It's supposed to be S Steve, but it wouldn't give me that many characters. So I just left it alone.
Also, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. Our show page is on Facebook at facebook.com/basicbrewing. We're on Google Plus, too. And thanks to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site, especially during this busy holiday season. You know how it works. Whenever you think of Amazon.com, think of us first. Go to basicbrewing.com, click on the Amazon link. That will take you to Amazon. Shop as you normally do, except with more vigor.
Shop till you drop.
And then it won't cost you any extra, but we'll get a commission. We also have associate links that work in a similar fashion for Brew Your Own Magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site as well. We've got our Basic Brewing iPhone app on iTunes, our Android app on Amazon.com. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory. We're on the Stitcher app, and we're on the Windows Phone directory, too, and I'm sure many other places. We're everywhere.
We've got more stuff than Carter's got liver pills.
We're I was going to say we're omnivorous, but that's not the word. We're omnipresent. We're also omnivorous. We'll eat just about anything. Check out our brewer's logbook at basicbrewingshop.com. In the front is a blank calendar that you can use to track your fermentations and plan your brews. And there's room in the back to log the details of up to 50 batches of beer. If you want to put a tip in our tip jar, some coinage in our guitar case, you can go to basicbrewing.com/support. Thanks to everybody who has done so already. And we're planning a thing. We're going to shoot a thing tomorrow.
Yeah.
That we're going to only put on the app. And if you have contributed to the tip jar this past year, we will send you a link to the video. So we'll see how that works. You're going to cook something up.
I am. Let them know. It's some duck. Duck.
Oh!
No.
That's a visual joke. The best kind to do on an audio podcast.
That's right.
All right. So anyway, either buy the app or put some coinage in the tip jar at basicbrewing.com/support. And thanks to everybody who's done so already. Protect your precious beer with one of our growler bags. Check those out at basicbrewingshop.com as well. We're here to do two things, as I alluded to in the beginning. Mm-hmm. We're here to go over your brewing disaster stories that you have sent in, and we got a bunch this time.
I know. Yeah.
And I got to thinking the other day, I said, we need to do a show where in the beginning, when I was a beginning home brewer, I discovered, my first batch got better after I had drank almost all of it. So what I did was I started to keep an archive of like 3 or 4 of each batch, and just periodically I would go back and check them. Well, I've still got beers from the late 90s in my basement. And so we have some lined up. I reached way back in the archives.
Yeah, you did.
And I found some beers that we can sample as we are reading these disaster stories. So we might have some real live disasters here on the show.
I'm really looking forward to not drinking these.
Well, we also have something to, in case these don't work out, you have, from the keg, you have the rye wit, which is less than 2% alcohol, but loaded with hops.
I do have a rye wit.
Yes, you do.
And
and I wish I could remember find the brewer's name who suggested the name for that beer. I thought that was really clever. And then I have the leftovers of my glass of the fruitcake barley wine, which we did the video podcast on just moments ago.
And that is a lovely, lovely beer. It's so we have the biggest beer I've ever drank, except for maybe Utopias, and the littlest beer I've ever drank, except for maybe Pabst Blue Ribbon
or water.
or water, and you brewed both of them.
Well, there you go. It's kind of bookends to the whole thing. So let's start off with one of the ancient homebrews. This
Okay.
one, we were into The Simpsons back then, and I called this Homebrew Brew 2.
It's so old it has a it has a hippie earth sign on the top.
Yeah, it has a surplus cap from Tie Dye Brewing Company, and their slogan is "Just chill."
Just
Imagine
chill.
that. Do you know that?
Okay.
Do you know this? The story behind the peace sign?
No, I don't.
It started in England, I believe, and it stands for, if you know what is it, semaphore, the thing with the flags and the
yeah.
Navy ships and
Yep.
things. The symbol for N is two arms kind of down in a diagonal like these two
Yeah.
things, and then the sign for D, I
Yeah.
believe, is straight up and down. So it stands for nuclear disarmament.
Oh,
So it actually meant something. Anyway, okay. And if you take out this bottom leg, it stands for Mercedes. So I love it when kids make what they think are peace signs on their shirts and stuff, and it turns out to be the Mercedes symbol. Anyway, okay, maybe you should open this over the
okay.
sink.
I'll do it.
This is a Pooh's Brew 2, and I have no idea. I can't remember what style it was. I used to have a database on the. Did it even fizz at all? You haven't gotten that far yet.
Get that far.
Do you know how to use? That's an ancient opener. Have you got it right side up?
I don't know.
Yeah, you got it. You're working it right. Work it, baby.
I can't open. I got it.
Ooh, there's a little hiss.
Yeah, there was a hiss. It was algae hiss. They're still looking for
Oh,
him.
it's growing. Oh, you better go. Okay, a Pooh's Brew 2. It's brown. It's porterish. Okay.
This is from
Cheers
1998.
to bellyaches to come.
Smells.
Ooh, well, it doesn't smell sour. It smells oxidized.
Very
It
oxidized.
smells way like as if you aged a barley wine. That's not bad.
Well, it's still drinkable.
There's a very at the very end of it, it's like brown sugar.
Yeah. I'm
You're not thrilled with it.
well, I'm not, but I'm not. I'm not giving up on it yet either. I'm getting kind of a weird. That's an old beer. Mm-hmm. That's an old beer.
Yeah, there are no hops left in it, but it's not infected. In fact,
No, in fact, that it's really pretty good.
I'm getting a whole lot of brown sugar from that.
A lot of brown sugar.
Ah,
Yeah.
that's not bad.
No,
Okay, well, in a way, that's disappointing.
no, that's not bad. There is a kind of a cider thing a little bit. Do you?
Maybe a
can't-
little, yeah.
Little green apple, maybe.
No,
there's no green apple.
I do get some oxidization.
I think it's oxidized.
Oxidization.
Yeah.
And my pronunciations come from from the fruitcake barley. Okay,
All right.
all right. This will be 3 hours long. This show. All right, our first letter, and these are in no particular order.
Okay.
This is from Ryan in who's a member of the North Shore Brewers in Massachusetts. Hello, gentlemen, he says. It was a beautiful June day. The smoker had turned out excellent sausages for lunch, and we're about to turn out even better ribs. My brewing partner Tim and I were brewing a 10-gallon batch of smoked maple porter, one of our most costly beers. It was our first brew at my new townhouse. The brew day was going really well. The pints were flowing, but not overly. As we hit knockout, Tim went inside to grab one thing or another, and I attached the outlet hose to the immersion chiller. As I was walking away from the nearly perfect 15-gallon stainless steel Blickman Boilermaker kettle, I pulled the hose up a hill towards the woods. I'd guess that I pulled 50 feet, or I guess that I pulled the 50 feet hose about 55 feet.
Oh, wow.
I felt the pressure that had been on the hose release, but I didn't realize what that meant until I heard the crash.
Oh.
7 hours of another great day of brewing literally came crashing down in an instant as the immersion chiller pulled the kettle, which pulled the burner over. I swore for a minute or two. But then I just stood there in silence and stared. I was in utter shock. It's one thing to lose your own beer, but when someone else worked just as hard to bring it to fruition and you take it away, it's tough to take. There was a decent-sized dent in the kettle that a rubber mallet did a well enough job on that it doesn't leak. The attached thermometer did not meet the same fate and is now just a pretty accessory. We rebrewed the beer, our third iteration of it. A week later, it was great, even if a bit more costly than I was hoping for. Oh, and those pork ribs didn't make me forget the brewing disaster, but they were darn tasty. So there you go.
Jeez.
So, and he sent a picture of the crime scene. Here's the toppled burner and the kettle and the pool of the maple, the smoked maple porter.
Ay, ay, ay.
So
that's all I have to say about that.
This is from Eddie in Cincinnati, Ohio. He says, some of my favorite BBR podcasts have been the Brewing Disaster shows. No pressure. They were both wonderfully entertaining and quite funny. Unfortunately, I now have something to contribute. I broke my 10-gallon water cooler mash tun. The inner liner cracked at the spigot. That's not the disaster. It was the impetus to building my kegel mash tun. I was brewing my first batch, a Berliner Weiss that was going to be sour mash. The plan was to mash in at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 C. You notice I've gone through the metric equivalent so much that people are now doing it too.
Yep.
Brought it to temperature 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 C, and let it sour for about 2 days. I put my new kegel mash tun on the propane burner and began to heat the water. It didn't take long to reach my strike temp, and I overshot it a bit. No problem, just stir it for a bit with my mash paddle, which I did when I noticed a spider web on the paddle. I would have just gone with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I decided not to use the water and began to drain it out the valve as I cleaned the mash paddle. This would be a good time to mention that it was getting late and I was in a hurry. I decided to dump the water out because the ball valve was just taking too long. Knowing the temperature of the water was only 130 degrees Fahrenheit, 54 C. I picked the kegel up from the bottom. As you know, kegs have a rim around the top and bottom.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom rim that was just heated by the propane burner was quite a bit hotter than the water inside. I quickly figured this out, dropped it, and ran inside. I went to the sink and turned on the cold water, waiting a moment for it to run cold as I just filled the kegel with hot tap water. This is when I realized my 125 degrees Fahrenheit
52 C
tap water was probably plenty hot without even using the burner. A quick look at my hand showed 3 blisters had already formed, covering the top pad of 3 fingers. A fourth formed a short time later on the second pad of my middle finger. Burns suck.
Yeah.
It's a T-shirt. I managed to finish mashing in that night. I boiled the beer 2 days later as planned, but did not like the hazy look it had, and my original gravity was 1020. I expected about 1030. I performed my first iodine test, and the sample exploded with purple-black from just a tiny drop of iodine. Obviously, I did not get full conversion, but I fermented it anyhow. However, it was not to be. I had a lot of firsts with this brew, including the first batch I have dumped in 4 years of brewing.
Oh.
There are a lot of heat.
Wow.
There are a lot of heat-related things in this round.
Well, it's global warming.
It's very localized.
Yeah, it's localized warming.
Justin says the subject is dry hopping.
I thought you said dry humping. I'm sorry.
That's another show. Hopefully this isn't a brewing disaster, but maybe a teachable moment. This weekend I dry hopped a pale ale. Oh, and this came from September. He didn't officially send it in as a brewing disaster, but I kept it anyway.
Yeah.
This weekend I dry hopped a pale ale that had been sitting in secondary for 3 weeks. I removed the bung from the carboy.
Insert joke.
Added the 1/2 ounce of Citra hops. Replaced the bung and closed the door to the utility room. No problem, right? A couple of hours later, I had to check something else in the utility room, and when I opened the door, I noticed the pleasant aroma of Citra hops emanating from the room. The best way I can describe what happened was that the beer had rejected the hops and tossed them out. I found the bung on the other side of the room. The bubble lock was broken, and the top is still missing. The hops were caked to the outside of the carboy and all over the floor. I'm guessing all the Citra aroma and flavor were tossed out with the hops. Time will tell if the beer got infected while it was open and exposed to the air, and the degree of oxidation that took place. But I'm trying to figure out what happened so I can avoid it in the future. So Justin was sending this in to say, what happened?
I don't know.
I think the beer was carbonated, sitting there
Yeah.
after having fermented, and the frozen hops, I guess, just like the Mentos in the Diet Pepsi thing.
Yep.
They provide a nucleation point for all that carbonation, and whoop, out they came.
Whoop, out they came. It's my new record. I'm going to release that next week. Whoop, out they came.
There'll be a line about a bung in there somewhere.
Somewhere. It's in a lyric.
Henry from Oakland, Nebraska.
Oh. Just across the bay.
That's it. I know I'm probably too late, and this isn't a winter, but I wanted to share. Well, you won't get anything with that attitude, Henry. I've been brewing for 2 years now and finally had to use my first blow-off tube the other day. I just pitched into a wheat beer, and since it's been so cold lately, I ferment in a spare closet upstairs instead of the basement. I should have known this is going to be a mess when I could hear the airlock bubbling while sitting on the couch in the room below the closet. I came home from work the other day and realized I couldn't hear the airlock anymore. Since I'd only pitched 48 hours ago, I knew something was wrong. I ran upstairs to find foam coming out of the airlock and a mess on the floor. I quickly switched off the airlock with my racking tube and will start setting my fermenters on a towel from now on. Well, that's with wheat beers. I find that they're seem to be a lot more prone to doing something like that.
Yeah, they do. And if you're going to ferment in a place that's not, like you can't use a hose to clean it out, put it in a bucket.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I got one of those at the Walmarts. I got one of those big plastic buckets with the little rope handles on it that you're meant to put, I guess, at a picnic. Put your drinks in there and put ice on top of it. Mm-hmm. And if you're worried about it, you put the carboy in that, and it overflows. Now, if it blows up,
it's a different story.
Yeah, but if you look, he's got a picture, and in the background, he's got Boulevard beers.
Yeah, he does.
Boulevard wheat. Why don't you? I think should we rinse? There's no sense in drinking all this.
I'm not drinking all this.
Although, Apu's Brew 2 is pretty tasty.
It wasn't bad.
It's kind of sweet, but it's not nasty. Greg says, just a quick reminder of how important it is to put away your toys. After kegging a batch of beer, I was cleaning a carboy, and some krausen was really stuck, so I decided to soak it overnight. My life got real busy that weekend, and I left for business that Monday. I was gone for 3 weeks. The weather at home turned colder and froze. He says, I guess it didn't need to worry about cleaning off any stuck krausen, and he attached a picture of a cardboard box full of giant shards of carboy.
Been there.
You froze a carboy?
I did. In fact, it was my the only one I've ever actually paid for. And it was a really nice 6-gallon carboy. I lifted it outside, and it broke, but it broke in a perfect circle around the rim at the bottom. Oh. And so it didn't fall over, and so I picked it up, and then all the water came out. Shall I open this? This is a Belgian wheat or wit beer.
Belgian wheat from October of 1999.
This is the one I am predicting will not be good.
Okay.
All
right.
I'm just going on record with that.
All right. Hold it over the sink. We have a sink here in the studio. Oh, well, it's not blowing up. A little bit of hiss.
Wow. Okay.
Pour with enthusiasm. Ooh. You gave me most of that. Thanks a lot.
Did I?
No, I don't know. Well, it's got a pretty good head on it. It's a little lighter than the previous one. It's like kind of a dark copper.
Yep. But it's still carbonated, and it smells oxidized.
Yeah, it has that same oxidized.
Mm-hmm. This is a lesson in oxidation.
Yeah. Our palates are going to be well trained after this to recognize the oxidized flavor. You're not retching.
It's not bad, but it doesn't taste like a wit or a wheat beer. It tastes.
Well, that might be my recipe.
You taste it and tell me what you get.
Ooh, it's way sweet.
It's very sweet and it tastes like sugar.
Yeah. Well, I think the hops have just completely died in these things. All the bitterness has just fallen out of these, and I think that we may just get sweet beers.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's not unpleasant,
No?
but it's nicely carbonated, which I'm kind of surprised, but it is.
It's just kind of watery.
It's just kind of watery and brown
and sweet.
sugary.
Yeah. Only it's less brown sugary than the previous one.
That's true.
But, it's not awful.
I've had worse.
I've brewed worse.
But, that's very interesting.
Well, I'm patting my past self on the back for good sanitization, I guess.
Yeah,
Because they're not infected.
I was expecting a gusher on that beer. I don't know why, but I just was.
Yeah, I don't know. The problem, I had the recipes in a database on my computer, but that's like 7 operating systems ago,
Right.
and it was on a like ClarisWorks or something, and I guess there's a way to find those. They're probably on a zip disk,
Probably.
so I got to find a zip drive, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Before I get on my soapbox. Okay, Nelson from Cincinnati. After many successful Mr. Beer kits and encouragement from friends, I decided to get all the equipment needed to start brewing 5-gallon batches, including the ever-famous red-handled capper. Foreshadowing. Everything was going well until it came time to bottle. After siphoning the beer from my fermenter into the bottling bucket, I went over to the sink on the other side of the kitchen where I had my bottles soaking in some sanitizer. I then began to hear the familiar sound of water trickling. Turns out the bottling bucket is shipped with the valve wide open.
Hated it.
After a quick close of the valve, mopping up the 1 gallon or so of beer, I thought that it would be smooth sailing from here on out. I decided that I would line up all my bottles, fill with the remaining beer, then cap them all after. Filling went fine, but when I went to cap my first bottle, I was doomed. The red-handled capper snapped in my hands, causing a domino effect of my now filled bottles.
Oh, no.
Boy, what a fun new hobby this is. Many paper towels and a quick run to the local homebrew shop later, I ended up with about 20 bottles from what was a 5-gallon batch. I called it my Red Capper Snapper Brown Ale.
Well, I think that deserves a red capper snap and around the world.
In a circle.
In a circle.
Arlen says, a friend of mine got married in March, and I said I would make a barley wine as part of his wedding present. It would be the bridal barley wine that he could open on his anniversary every year for 10 years.
Oh,
That's a thoughtful gift.
that's very nice, yeah.
After a lot of things getting in the way of life, I finally got to start making it in May using an extract with partial mash barley wine recipe, which had rave reviews online. The brew day went perfectly, and the fermentation started nicely, but within a week, fermentation had stopped, and it was only at 4.5% ABV. I tried changing the temperature, stirring up the yeast, nothing. I added a bit more yeast, nothing. I searched for advice online. I added crushed beano. I bought a special cask fermentation yeast for high-gravity beers, nothing. My wife was beginning to lament how much time, stress, and money was going into this barley wine, which was living under our kitchen table. At this point, I made a stout while working on the barley wine. The stout ended up with a really weird metallic aftertaste that I couldn't get rid of. Then I made the Fast Brew ESB from Beer and Wine Journal,
There you go.
with a few tweaks to it to take it into nut brown territory. It got ferociously infected. I was beginning to get tired of my bad brewing luck. Finally, I emailed you. And you...
Now the real problems begin.
Yeah, that's your next mistake. No. You pointed out that the bulk extract may not have had the amount of fermentable sugars promised. What I said was when you make a barley wine with a lot of extract, the finishing gravity is probably going to go up.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to wind up with a very sweet barley wine that may not finish where you expected. So anyway, I got a load of Maris Otter, made a mash with that, and added the fresh wort. Boom! The barley wine began to ferment like crazy, and ended up at 10.5% ABV and is way too smooth for its own good.
Mm-hmm.
It's bottled to condition until March, but even as young as it is, it tastes great.
Good.
So there you go. It has a happy ending.
Happy and hoppy ending.
Yeah, get your carboy out from under the kitchen table or the dining room table. Anyway, Rich sent a link to his blog 4 Pours and Several Beers Ago with a post. My first homebrewing disaster. He was very. It's kind of a long post, so I will summarize.
Please do.
He was bottling a Russian Imperial Stout that has been sitting in the secondary for about 6.5 months. That's not the. Okay, here's where the disaster starts. I followed it up the next day on Thursday by brewing a new batch of beer. This was going to be a clone of Three Floyd's Zombie Dust, and I was going off a recipe that's posted on homebrewtalk.com, which is a good site to go to.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't tell by the name of this post, it was an absolute yard sale. This is probably the most organized and confident I've ever been on a brew day. He says this was his first time ever doing the entire brewing process by himself. However, I'm getting more and more confident with the process as I brew more beers, so he wasn't too scared about doing it alone. So he borrowed his friend Rich's mill to his... maybe this isn't Rich that sent it in. So anyway, I'll figure it out. Maybe he has a friend. Maybe his name is Rich, and he has a friend. It could happen.
Maybe his name is Edgar.
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 Oh, it is just. Okay, this is the first time I've had to crush grains as part of an extract recipe, so I had to borrow Rich's mill to do it. Rich said all I needed was a drill to turn the mill and crush the grains, so I didn't worry about it. I have a drill in my garage. So when I hooked it up to the mill after measuring my grains out, it wasn't even strong enough to turn the mill at all. I tried charging it up to it for a while, to no avail. It still wouldn't crush any grains. So he found a drill from somebody else. Fast forward, he okay. I'm now coming to the part that I had not thought through of how I was going to get the wort from the kettle through a filter and a funnel into the glass carboy. After several different awkward attempts, I finally got a system of sitting above the glass carboy, put the kettle up on a table, and used the siphon and tubing to pour through the strainer and funnel that I was holding. The next problem was due to all the hops. There was a lot of muck built in the strainer, so I had to bring in a clean, sanitized spoon and the garbage can so I could keep it moving around in order for a liquid to drain through. This became a very long process. In the middle of it, I had heated up a glass container to get ready for hydrating my yeast, and while I was transferring, I heard the glass container shatter into a million pieces in the kitchen.
Oh.
This caused me to jump, which resulted in me losing control of the tubing, so it shot wort on the floor and all over my lap before it got back towards the carboy. So he wound up recovering,
mm-hmm.
and everything came out all right in the end. So he says the lessons are need to have a backup plan in case it's really warm outside and the wort chiller isn't able to get the temperature down far enough. I skipped that part. Mm-hmm. Get a more powerful drill and never brew alone ever. Well, we brew alone. Yeah, you will gain confidence, Rich, or friend of Rich,
or Edgar.
Edgar. Joe from Kansas City, Missouri,
Ooh.
And Haverhill, Massachusetts. I have trouble with the postal abbreviations. He says, James, this is my brewing mishap. One hot August day, I made a 5-gallon all-grain brown ale. Everything went perfect. I boiled the wort and hooked up my kettle to my counterflow chiller. The water would not cool down lower to 82 degrees. I had the bright idea how to cool down the wort. I had in my freezer about 19 or 20 of those frozen ice packs that come with mail-order yeast. I threw them in a bucket with some star sand. I then threw the sanitized ice packs into the 200-degree wort. The temperature was dropping quickly. I had thoughts of winning the Nobel Prize for homebrewing. Then I looked in my kettle. Most of the ice packs had split open with gooey stuff oozing out. I then felt like Jethro Bodine when he was a double knot spy, only I was a double knot stupid. On a positive note, I did make a lot of room in the freezer.
Well, yeah. And now you can't decide whether to be a brain surgeon or a double knot spy.
That's right. Okay, do you want to rinse the?
Sure.
We're done with that one, right?
Yeah,
You want to rinse that while I'm reading
I'll
a
rinse.
story from our friend Dan in Sydney, who's come to town a couple of times. Dan says some background. My latest beer I brewed used 50% Munich malt and 50% wheat malt. I did a 40-liter, about 10 gallons batch. See, now he's going from metric to our way of measuring. So see, it goes both ways.
Is that one yours?
Sure.
I don't remember.
I don't think it matters.
No.
This cold sore is almost healed.
Yeah.
So he brewed a beer. He said he got sick the next day.
Ooh.
He took the day off from work and felt guilty just lying around. So he decided to clean one of his taps on his kegerator. So he says, so at about 1 p.m. I got up and went to the fridge. I loosened up the back of the tap, took out the tap shank out, cleaned the inside thoroughly, placed the tap shank back in, and tightened the tap back up. I then proceeded to increase the pressure of the keg to 30 psi. I was sore and tired, so I decided to watch a movie in my bedroom while lying in bed. I fell asleep. So as I woke up, I noticed it was about 10:30 p.m. He doesn't give the metric equivalent of that, but
54C. Pretty sure.
I got up to close my sliding door, which is right next to the fridge, and almost slipped over. I thought rain had entered the apartment, but on closer examination, I saw what looked like dark fluid at the side of the fridge. I walked to the other side of the apartment to grab a mop, but then noticed this amber fluid covering several square meters. What on earth was going on, I thought. Did some piping break inside my apartment? Did the fridge break? Why was this dark fluid on my floor? Well, I guess if you're going to have dark fluid on the floor, beer is a pretty good thing to have on the floor.
Yeah.
I went to the fridge to check inside and noticed a hissing sound from the back of the tap I had just cleaned and connected back. It was foaming with what sounded like CO2 escaping. I immediately turned off the CO2 bottle and then decided to pick up that same keg I was carbonating. Oh, my goodness, the keg was empty. It then dawned on me that my loose connection was at the back of the tap. All the while, the keg was carbonating the beer at 30 psi, meant there was an escape route not only for the CO2, but my Munich wheat beer. All of the 18 liters, 4.75 gallons, of could be found floating on top of my tiles through the length of the apartment.
Oh, jeez.
I may be a grown man, but I just about cried.
That's a mess.
Speaking of a mess, what do we got next?
We've got a lovely little porter from the year 2000.
A porter from the year 2000. Woo! That one's aggressively carbonated.
Now this one might be good. I mean, it's a dark beer,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
going to be oxidized. I can pretty well predict that. But maybe that's a good thing.
But we tried one of my my award-winning espresso porters that was about, 10 years old?
Yes, and it was delicious.
It was really good.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't oxidized at all. It was a higher gravity beer. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Smells a little oxidized.
Oh, yeah. And again, very sweet. No hops.
Yeah. I'm surprised. Ooh, but there's a little roastiness in there with the sweetness this time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a, I'd drink it. No, I probably wouldn't, actually.
It's kind of watery.
But
I think if it were a higher gravity beer with a higher finishing gravity, I think it would be more enjoyable. But it's kind of watery.
I just get the big oxidation in the bouquet, and then I get just a sweet, sugary beer. It's very interesting that all three of these beers have pretty much tasted the same to me, meaning very sweet.
Very similar.
Yeah, and yet they're three very different beers. So they kind of go to the common denominator of oxidation and sweet.
And they are not infected.
No, they're not. They're actually very clean.
Yeah. They're just old.
They're just old. It's
Huh.
kind of like me. I'm clean and old. Although I am infected. But it's clearing up.
TMI. Which glass did you have again?
Is it TMI as one of the stars on the Disney Channel? I think.
I'm TMI. Jim from Herndon, Virginia. Earlier this year, I used my March pump for the first time. I was rushing to try it, stuck barbs on the in and out.
You should have said that. Because I just had beer come out my nose.
Wasn't that in a Clockwork Orange?
I think so.
Go down to the Moloko Milk Bar and, and stick some barbs on the in and out.
I hope she's okay.
and some ultraviolet. Okay. Okay, I was rushing to try it, stuck barbs on the in and out, and slipped some hose on. Well, if you're going to stick barbs on the in and out, you might as well slip some hose on.
That's right.
About 5 minutes into a recirculated whirlpool, otherwise known as a hot tub, maybe.
That's right.
I knocked the about 5 minutes into a recirculated whirlpool, I knocked the output off while the wort was still at 180 Fahrenheit, which would be
I don't know.
about 83. I don't know.
It's hot.
It's hot.
Ollie, how hot is it?
It's hot. It's hot. I was standing over it when this happened. I pulled my shirt away from me, but was still very dehydrated. My stomach was very red. I was lucky it wasn't worse.
Yeah.
I lost about a gallon of wort before I could get it shut off. Beer still came out well, so all was not lost. Well, it's a good thing you had the hose on. Thanks, Jim.
So Barb's is okay. Get those things sticking in her.
Okay, Martin. Longtime listener, first-time writer here from Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania.
I'll go with that.
I actually started brewing this February and listened to your podcast, and as of last week, I'm now completely caught up on the audio side. Wow. I'm so sorry. I also recently entered my first 3 BJCP competitions with an American Brown Ale and took home a third in the table, a second in the table, and a second place overall. Wow.
Yeah.
Get
out while you can.
Yeah. Quit while you're ahead.
Yeah.
Pardon me. On to the disaster. I was traveling up to Amherst, Massachusetts, to visit a fraternity brother and groomsman for the weekend back in May and decided to teach him how to brew. I bought all the ingredients for a nice 1-gallon all-grain recipe. The actual brewing went well, too well. We hit our temperatures, volumes were all correct, the works. It got to the point where we needed to chill down the wort to pitching temperature and decided to just immerse the kettle in the sink with cold water running over the lid. We stepped outside to smoke some cigars, drink a beer or two, and congratulate ourselves on a beer well done. Big mistake. We came back inside to discover that the lid was not as tightly fitting as we had thought, and over a gallon of extra water had wicked itself into the pot. Balls, he says. After several expletives that shall not be mentioned, we decided to put the pot back onto the stove and simply boil off all the additional water that had accumulated and then chill again. Say, I don't know if I would have thought about that.
Yeah.
A brilliant solution, or so we thought. We turned the heat on high and decided to put on a movie.
See? You can't multitask. I'm sorry.
About 15 minutes in, we heard some sort of sizzling sound coming from his electric stove. We rushed over and were greeted by a massive boilover that had run all the way down to the kitchen floor. Double balls, he said. It looked like the Mount Vesuvius of wort. We killed the heat, moved the pot, and attempted to clean up the boiling hot wort and foam that had flooded his stove. After cleaning everything up as best we could, we started the boil on a much lower heat setting. Didn't matter. The pot was so full of watered-down wort, it proceeded to boil over 2 more times. Meanwhile, they had gone to the grocery store. They'd played some parcheesi. No, I'm making it up. All in all, we added about 4 hours to our brew day, including cleanup. Somehow it ended up being a tasty beer. And he recently made a batch on his own. I wonder why he decided that.
I don't know.
Thanks, Martin. Don't leave the pot. Unless you're having a problem with that. Then you... Brandon from West Chicago. He says, a very excited young homebrewer. My name is Brandon. I live in West Chicago, Illinois. I've been listening to your podcast for about 3 weeks now at work, or while I work. I've been listening to the archived episodes in order to learn all I can about home brewing. I've never brewed my own beer, and I almost didn't start. My friend discouraged me from making what he says is a mediocre to bad beer for a lot of work.
Good heavens.
Boo, friend. His brother made his own beer a few years ago, and it was, in fact, watery and bland. He's been in my basement. After learning tons of info for your podcast, I'm excited to announce that I will brew 2 small 1-gallon batches this Saturday with a friend. I'm using a cheap extract kit that I've purchased German Crystal to steep with, Centennial hops and California ale yeast. I will be ignoring their yeast, steeping my grains to add more complexity, and adding my hops the last 5 minutes of the boil for more aroma. Wish me luck. Oh, well, this isn't a disaster at all.
No, it might be a disaster in the making.
No, he sounds like he's on the right track. I don't
think
know.
he is.
How did this make it in there?
I don't know.
Well, congratulations, Brandon.
I didn't know where you were headed with that.
He's a stowaway in the disaster show. How did that happen? Okay. Ed. I tend to brew a new beer most of the time when I brew, but I do have one recipe that I try to keep on tap consistently. It's a saison I call the Farmer and the Rye. In early 2013, I brewed what I thought was one of my best versions of the beer ever and decided I wanted to enter it into the National Homebrewers Conference or competition for 2013. My standard procrastination led me to bottling from the keg one morning prior to work, since the package needed to go out that day in order to make it on time. All went well, and I beer gunned the saison. How many times have I said that?
More than I can count.
Packed those 2 bottles among others up, reconnected all my faucets, and I was off to work. Later that evening, I had a hankering for some saison with my dinner, so I took a walk over to the Keyser and pulled out the tap handle. Nothing. Strange, I thought. Maybe I forgot to turn the CO2 back on, so I checked everything, and everything seemed right, and and the other beers were flowing. Then I noticed a smell of stale beer, not unlike how my old frat house smelled at times. I grabbed the flashlight and looked into the bottom of the Keyser, and my heart sunk. There was a 4.5-gallon puddle as big as Texas of my delicious beer at the bottom of the Keyser. I told a bunch of friends about the debacle, which ultimately was caused by a leaky picnic faucet, and everyone said the same thing. Watch that beer score 40-plus and advance to round 2. Wouldn't you know it, they were right. Not only did I lose almost an entire keg of beer, it was an award-winning beer that took second place in my region. That's my tale. I guess the lesson learned is don't bottle beer at 6 a.m. before work. Who knew? He says, P.S. I re-brewed the beer for round 2 but didn't place. Check those taps.
Yep.
Cracked Rib IPA. This is from Joe in Madison, Wisconsin. Until I decided I wanted a more sessionable IPA, I first brewed this as an Imperial IPA in February of 2012. I've lost the ability. Old beer makes me not be able to read. I was brewing outside, and it was cold out, like 5 below 0 Fahrenheit, which is...
What is that?
Negative 20 Celsius. And I was freezing my Wisconsin face off. So I was going to name it Frozen Face Imperial IPA until this happened. I was taking care of Lexi, my friend's Jack Russell Terrier, and I was finishing up the brew day after I pitched the yeast. Lexi was upstairs while I was cleaning my equipment in the basement. After I unhooked the wort chiller from the sink, I set the hose on the floor, and a puddle of water formed in the middle of the basement floor. While I was scrubbing out my kettle, I heard the dog yelping like she was injured or hurt. I ran to go save Lexi, and I slipped on the puddle, landed on my left side, and slid about 10 feet towards the staircase. The only thing that stopped my momentum was the first step of the staircase. As I was writhing in pain, I saw Lexi and my friend standing at the top of the stairs looking down at my painful contortions. It turns out that the dog makes yelping noises like a normal dog that's hurt would make when she gets excited. My friend came to pick her up and the dog was a little overexcited. I cracked a rib, had abrasions on my abdomen, and a deep cut on my shin from the staircase. It was worth it, though, because this beer took third place in the 2013 Door County Homebrew Competition. I brewed this in April 2013 and entered the competition in June of 2013. The scoring note suggested more hops. So I feel cracked rib IPA. Cripa. That's what I'm going to say from now on. Cripa. Cripa could have placed better had it been brewed closer to the competition date. Don't get me wrong, personal safety is important, but in the end, award-winning beer was more important in this case. So there you go.
Wow.
Dogs.
Dogs.
My first boil-over was because of a dog barking in the backyard. Ran to go look what the dog was barking at, came back, and all the hops were all over the stove. Do you want to rinse?
Yeah.
Rinse one more time.
Let's do it.
Rinse and spit.
Rinse and spit.
Adam. Oh, this is Adam Drager. He's been on the show. He's of Yak and Yeti, I believe. After 13 years of homebrewing, it just goes to show that sometimes we don't get any smarter or safer. I wanted a separate small stovetop pot to whip up some starters, so I picked up the cheapest 12-quart stock pot I could find. Very thin and not the highest quality, but good enough for its purpose. I attached a weldless ball valve to the pot and boiled my first starter wort. I then moved the pot to my brew house so I could run the wort through my plate heat exchanger. He's bragging now. And set it up on the stand above the pump and heat exchanger. I then hooked up my tubing and started running off the wort through the heat exchanger into my sanitized starter flask. Everything was going great and according to plan until the wort was half gone. The pot was so light that the only thing keeping the pot upright was the weight of the wort. Once the wort left the pot, the hose connected to the ball valve torqued the rest of the pot onto my feet.
Goodness.
I was wearing boot-like shoes with the clasps that you have to tie, like on a high-top boot. I could already feel the hot wort on my skin and thought, "Shoo off fast!"
Shoo off fast.
He says, no time to think in full sentences at this point. When I started foot hurt. Shoo off fast. Fire bad. When I started to untie as fast as possible, I got a knot before loosening the ties completely. Screw it, I just grabbed the back of the heel and pried off the shoe with all my might. Upon removing my sock, I realized a huge chunk of skin was rubbed off completely inside my sock.
Oh, my goodness.
Not sure what degree burn it was, but it took a month to heal. I recommend the non-stick bandages designed for burns or Vaseline so that the bandage don't heal into the mesh. And then when you go to change them, they won't peel the healed layer back off.
Wow. Something just puckered all over me. I'm not going to say what.
It ain't over yet.
It ain't over yet?
You'd think the story is over. But 2 months later, I made another starter batch and was extra careful this time. The pot seems completely stable this time. Oh, well, let's run off again. Oh! I stupidly tried to catch the pot and got boiling wort all over my right wrist and the top of my hand. I immediately ran it under a cold tap for a few minutes. Feels fine. I think I got lucky. The next day, it looked like I had a very severe sunburn all over my hand and wrist and felt about the same, too. I put a note on the pot saying, "Don't use unless you weigh it down." That, along with "shoo off fast," I think. I eventually rigged up a board with eye bolts and bungee cord so I can move the pot from the stove to my weighted board assembly and bungee the pot in a stable place. Adam,
that's one light pot.
Okay, we just got a few more, and now we have the Y2K mead.
So tell us about this.
I think it's a Y2K mead. Well, I made
it says.
I made it in when did I make it? In May of 1999 for to drink on the new year. Oh, and it sounds like a sparkling mead. I think it is.
I believe it is.
Pour with vigor.
Vigor couldn't come. He's not here today.
Wow. It's very clear. It's sparkling.
I expect this to be good.
Smells. Oh, cheers.
It smells good.
Smells fruity.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's good. It's a little thin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fairly, I mean, it's sparkling, so it's going to be low gravity. It's not as sparkling as I'd hoped, but ain't nothing wrong with that.
No.
That's pretty tasty.
Yeah.
I think this is one of Andy's Andy's store, the homebrewery.com. They used to sell a mead kit with, I think before honey got expensive. I think they sold it, and I think that's probably what that was. Just honey and water, yeast
very
nutrient.
Honey-like, which one would expect since that's all that's in it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you still taste the honey. It doesn't. It hasn't morphed into some other flavor.
Yeah, it didn't taste like it's got high alcohol, which
not.
may be dangerous. That's good.
Yeah,
I got
actually, it's quite good.
2-3 more bottles of that downstairs.
Yeah,
Huh, that's good. That would be good if you had like a little fruit juice or some sort of where you could make some sort of a mixed
little mead cocktail.
Yeah, or like putting the raspberry or the Woodruff syrups in the Berliner Weisses. Anyway, yeah, it's good. I'm kind of disappointed. I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't have any nasty beers in there.
Nothing was revolting,
No,
but they weren't great either.
no, they weren't.
They were sweetly insipid.
But you could kind of like my sense of humor. But you could. They're drinkable.
Yeah,
They weren't putrid.
no,
Okay, Chuck from Salt Lake City. He shared 2 stories. Since we're running short on time, I'm going to share the first one. On National Home Brewing Day this year, I decided to invite some friends and neighbors over who had been asking about learning to brew. I woke up early and got all the gear laid out in my carport and started heating my strike water. When I heat my strike water, I'll set my digital thermometer's alarm to alert me when it's close, and I go about other things. This day was no different. I went inside and took care of a few chores. My mother called to say hi, as most mothers do, just as the alarm on the thermometer went off. Thinking I could talk to her while I simply turned off the heat to wait for my guests, I walked outside and was greeted by plumes of black smoke coming from my burner.
oh boy.
I rushed to see what the problem was and found 12-inch flames coming from the gas supply hose to my burner. I said to my mother on the phone, "I've got to go. I almost blew myself up," and promptly hung up on her. I turned the gas off at the tank and discovered that I'd wrapped the rubber gas line around the heat shield base of my burner when I used it last and didn't unwrap it all the way.
Oh boy.
Knowing I had guests headed my way, I hopped in the car and ran to the local hardware store to buy a new hose. When I returned, my guests had shown up. I fixed the issue and carried on with my brew day. Meanwhile, my phone is sitting in the car ringing constantly as my worried mother and my wife, who was not home and who my mother had called about the almost blew myself up comment, were desperately trying to contact me, thinking the house was burning down. Other than that, it was a successful brew day, and I had lots of fun. Now, I always make sure to double-check the location of my gas lines before I start brewing. His second story was when he was 4, his dad had a glass carboy that he kept change in, and he was using it as a rocking horse.
Oh, well,
Ouch.
nothing else to say there.
Yeah, end of the story, over 1,000 stitches, thousands of dollars in medical bills, and a 14-inch scar later, I'm here and walking. Which is a lucky thing, probably. So beware of the carboys.
Yep.
Your glass carboys away from the kids. Scott writes in, an otherwise perfect brew day. My brew buddy and I completed our boil and chilled the wort. Typically, while I run the chiller, my buddy sanitizes the bucket and gets the starter ready to pitch. I handed off the kettle and turned around to start the cleanup. When I turned back around, I could see an alarming amount of foam and about to foam over 7.9-gallon bucket. He had poured into the bucket of sanitizer instead of the bucket he had just prepared. 4 gallons of perfectly good wort mixed with 2.5 gallons of sanitizer. 3 hours of time wasted and some really disappointed yeast.
Yeah.
Luckily, it was the second batch of the day. And I'd already had a healthy dose of liquid tolerance to help me get over it.
Mm-hmm.
Now every time we brew, I ask him, now which bucket has the sanitizer? This one comes from Sweden, so I'm assuming it's Jan instead of Jan, maybe. Maybe it's Jan. Do you think it's Jan?
I don't know.
I heard you wanted brewing disaster stories. I have one, even if I've only brewed once so far and failed. You have a perfect record.
Yeah.
I bought a small all-grain brewing kit from Brooklyn Brew Shop and have been impressed by it so far. The only problem was a rather big one. The brew day was a big success, even if it was a weekday night. I went to bed very late and put the wort in a 1-gallon carboy in the kitchen cabinet. Early the next morning, my wife woke me up, informing me we had beer everywhere. She was a bit skeptical even beforehand because of the risk of smell in our kitchen, and I had told her there shouldn't be a risk for that. I later realized I had pushed the blow-off tube too far into the carboy, and the bucket was probably way too small. I guess I got some siphoning effect, and most of the wort was now in my cabinet, pouring from shelf to shelf, drenching the microwave and various other stuff on its way down, ending up under the permanently installed kitchen cabinet. I had to unmount the skirting boards to be able to clean up and still have a hard time convincing my wife that the yeast smell will fade with time. Well, I've ordered a new kit and will brew my second batch tomorrow. Wish me luck.
I hope your marriage...
Yeah, exactly. Good luck finding a new place to live.
Yeah. Wow.
And the last one, Gary... It says, I love Hefeweizens and decided to brew one for Christmas. Now, I was stressing from the outside as my wife hates the smell in the house, and she would only be gone for a few hours. As I was pushed for time, I quickly laid out my grain and hops and heated my water as it was brew in a bag. I fixed this to the edge of the pot and was prepared to dough in. Unfortunately, as I am a noob, I misjudged how far the bag would drop when the grain went in and swiftly burnt the arse right out of the bag. He's from the UK, apparently. As I'm not the sharpest, I didn't notice and carried on merrily until it was time to lift the bag out.
Oh, no!
I prepared for the heavy lift ahead, maneuvered myself into position, and, as Steve said, oh no! Empty grain bag with gaping burnt hole. They were my favorite band in the 80s.
I like them.
Gaping Burnt Hole. Mm-hmm. To make the best of a bad situation, I fixed what was left of the bag to an empty fermenting vessel and carefully poured in the wort, letting the bag catch the grain. Mm-hmm. I cannot begin to put in the words the sticky, hot, and stressful kitchen shenanigans that followed. I can still hear the sound of my shoes sticking to the floor as I tried to tidy. Once I had cleaned up and retrieved the situation as far as I could, I started the boil, and as I knew I had lost much of the efficiency of the grain, I added a kilo of DME. Well, Merry Christmas. This year I will have a keg of burnt, partial mash Hefeweizen to keep me company. I have no idea how it will turn out. Perhaps Santa will swap it for a keg of Franziskaner or Weichsteffen. More likely, weak Hefe with burnt polyester notes.
Well, yeah.
So there you go, Gary. I'm sure it'll turn out just fine.
That's bound to. Don't worry. Relax. Have a homebrew.
Have a burnt Hefeweizen.
Yep.
Well, thanks to everybody who's sent in a story. Steve and I are going to sit down after we turn off the mic. We're going to pick our 10 favorites, and we will send you a prize. Probably we'll give you a choice between, a growler bag and a brewer's logbook.
Just in case you want to write something down.
That's right. And you can document your disasters for next time.
That's right.
Thanks to everybody. Those are some fun ones. Those are some fun ones. Have a little more mead. It's a big chew.
The theme this year seemed to be messes.
And burning.
Smells like burning. Tastes like burning.
Same as it ever was.
Same as it ever was.
You may ask yourself, is that my beautiful burnt Hefeweizen?
How do I work this? Wort chiller.
I just unplugged my microphone.
No, your headphones. Okay. thanks to everybody who sent in a story. And thanks to everybody. I was going to read the whole in thing.
It's very long.
That's what she said. This is the last podcast of the year. We really appreciate you guys sticking with us all this long time. And I'm not just talking about this show. But thanks for sticking with us for, 8 years?
Yeah. How did that happen?
Crazy. I don't know. Stick-to-itiveness.
Something like that.
So we will, and thanks to you, Steve, for being along.
That's my
for the
pleasure.
ride. We've got much more coming in the next year, so stick with us, and have a Merry Christmas, and we will see you in 2014.
Happy brewing.